Okay, Noemi Torres, you've joined us now. Thank you. So I think we're just missing one person. We'll wait maybe 1 minute and then we'll get started if that's okay with everybody.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, theirs is there. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I think we have everybody. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody. I'm Rick Abramson. I manage the Urban Design and Architecture Studio for the City of West Hollywood. We want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Before we get started, let me do the land acknowledgement. So this meeting is taking place while acknowledging that the land on which we gather, and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood, is the occupied unceded seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Quiche peoples. All right, so we're gathering this evening, or this late afternoon, maybe going into the evening, to talk about a potential new Playhouse facility for the City of West Hollywood. We're really excited that we've put together a rather stellar team of wonderful, creative, and knowledgeable advisors to help us talk through what makes sense for the future of the city at this location and the type of facility that will make most sense and be most useful in serving some of our arts programming goals for the city. So I thought we would start with some introductions, and given that we're going to see 3 presentations this evening and we have 3 firms that are waiting to share their visions with us, if I could just ask everybody to give us maybe 1 or 2 sentences, a little bit about their background, so everybody knows who's on the line here. So Martin, I think I'll start with you from Arts and Cultural Affairs.
Thank you. I'm Martin Gantman, Chair of Arts and Cultural Affairs, and I've also been an architect and a civil engineer.
Great, thank you. Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Deaton, and I use female pronouns, she, her. I also am on the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission with Martin, very gratefully. I chair the Art on the Outside subcommittee, and I'm a creator and an artist. Yeah.
Fantastic, thanks for joining us. From Planning Commission, Rogerio Carvalho.
Hi, I'm Rogerio Carvalho. I've been on the Planning Commission for about 6 years, and before that I was an Arts Commissioner for a period of 4 years. I've worked in the architecture field since the 90s. Thank you.
Thanks, Rogerio. And from our Public Facilities Commission, Elaine Polishek.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Polishek. I'm the former chair of the Public Facilities Commission. My background is mostly in city government work. I was the assistant city manager for the city of Santa Monica for a number of years. And early on in my career, I was the open space manager responsible for the design and policy for all of the open space in the city of Santa Monica.
Fantastic. Thank you. Noemi Torres.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Noemi Torres, and I've been with the Public Facilities Commission for about 5 years now. Before that, I was at the Women's Advisory Board. So I'm really grateful to be part of this great project. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And in addition to our commissioners, we also have 5 members of the public with specific expertise that have graciously agreed to help us. And so Andrew Campbell, we'll start with you.
Hello, I'm Andrew. I have a BA and MFA in theater. I worked for the LA County Arts Commission for 10 years, and I'm the previous arts manager for the City of West Hollywood. And I'd also like to say that this is a very exciting opportunity for me because we purchased this during my tenure and it's been a passion project of mine. So I really appreciate being invited to participate in this.
Thank you, Andrew. Jason Lorcher.
Hi, I'm Jason Lorcher with Green Dinosaur. Green Dinosaur is a green building consultancy focused on sustainability and community resilience, and thankful to be a part of the group.
Thank you, Jason. Esther Margulies.
Hi, Esther Margulies. I'm a registered landscape architect and a professor in the Master of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism program at USC. I have a practice called the Office of the Design Landscape, and I'm also a co-founder of the LA River Public Art Project. And it's great to see old friends and folks I've connected with in the past.
Thanks, Esther. And I'm going to apologize up front because I think we have a typo on your last name in the coming slides. Brian Wickersham.
I'm Brian Wickersham. I'm an architect and the owner of Ox Architecture. We specialize in performing arts projects and also do a lot of mixed use and multifamily projects around the West Hollywood area and in West Hollywood. And very excited to be a part of this process.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian. And Uzair Farouki, you're the...
Hey everybody, Uzair Farouki, I'm with MGAC. I'm a vice president over here. We're a project management consultancy. We've been fortunate enough to do some work in the city of West Hollywood, and we are thankful to be invited to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Uzair. In addition, we have a number of city staff that I was hoping could introduce themselves as we go forward here. So Rebecca, why don't you start off?
Sure. Hi, my name is Rebecca Eman. I am the current arts manager. We are very excited about the City Playhouse coming online. We will ultimately be the primary user of the space in terms of programming. So it's an important asset to us that we have been long awaiting. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. I see we have our city manager joining us. Mr. Wilson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rick. Hello, everyone. I'm David Wilson, city manager. I've been city manager for the city of West Hollywood for just over a year now, but I've been with the city almost 23 years now. Thank you all for participating in this process and bringing your expertise and your community knowledge to the process. It's going to be very helpful for us. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for the presentations, but I did have the good fortune of looking at all the presentations as staff evaluated them. And I know it's going to be a very hard process to select just one. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you, David. Oscar, did you want to introduce yourself?
Oscar Delgado, Assistant City Manager. First and foremost, thank you to all. I was looking at the list and I know most of you and I've worked with most of you. So it's great to have you. I was part of the group that purchased the Playhouse a couple of years ago because Andrew was prodding us to buy it. And I'm so glad that we've gotten this far. And again, thank you all for your support and volunteering for this. I think it's going to be a unique project that we're all going to be proud of when it's all done. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Oscar. And I don't see her on the line right now, but I believe Helen Collins is probably going to be joining us, who's our Facilities and Field Services Manager. And Garen, did you want to introduce?
She did just join.
Oh, perfect. Helen, do you want to say hello?
Hello, sorry I was late. I was stuck on another meeting and I just couldn't get out of. Sorry, Helen Collins, Facilities and Field Services Division Manager.
Great, thanks, Helen. And then Garen, if you would introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Garen Yallis. I'm the architectural and urban designer with the Urban Design and Architecture Studio. You've gotten a few emails from me already and probably a few more throughout this process. So thank you everyone, and we're excited to have you all here.
Yeah, thanks Garen for all your help with this. All right, and Rebecca, is Eva joining us this evening?
Not tonight.
Okay, great. So let's move forward. For those in the public who are joining us tonight or this evening, welcome. We're excited to hear your thoughts as we move forward as well. I think we have a pretty good agenda for the evening, but the majority of the time is set aside to hear from three really amazing firms who have generously brought some thought and time to develop some visions for what might be possible at this site. And so we want to make sure we have time to hear from them. Let me just say, for those who do want to participate, we would welcome your comments. Please keep your mic muted and use the raised hand function in Zoom if you're familiar with that. If you're not comfortable with that, we're happy to take written comments in the chat box as well. So we will be monitoring that along the way. And again, here is the advisory group as it's been constituted. A little background on the project itself. The city, as Oscar mentioned, purchased the facility a number of years ago now. And prior to moving forward, we were asked to do an assessment of the existing building. As part of that assessment, it became clear that to renovate the facility would be a very expensive proposition. It would result in a loss of upwards of almost 30 seats of seating capacity, and would entail such an extensive remodel that effectively everything would end up being brand new: roofing, technology systems, bathrooms, lobby. Nothing was accessible. So through this process, we thought, it makes sense to explore the idea of a new facility. And if in fact a new facility could be constructed in its place that would better serve the goals of the arts community, be more inclusive in the types of art that might be integrated, that it made sense to at least explore the possibility. And so we put together a call from our bench contract, and we had now 3 firms that have proposed the vision before you tonight. Each has an interesting take on what is possible at this site. What I would say that in going through this exercise, that there is no building at this point, there is no project. It's just an idea for a potential project. And the charge of this advisory group is really to become more analytical and help us, us being staff in particular, to evaluate the strengths and the weaknesses of each of these visions, and to help us understand which approach to a new Playhouse facility might be in the best alignment with city goals for both the built and the natural environment. And so each of the advisory group members was sent an evaluation sheet that was laying out particular areas within our adopted city goals and policies that we're hoping you can help us sort of evaluate and bring a certain lens to that. And examples of the type of things we're interested in is how this facility might further some of our climate action goals for the city, making sure that we have as diverse and inclusive as possible facility, both from an accessibility standpoint and inviting to all, but also the artists who might participate in creating art and displaying or performing art in the space. We also want to make sure that any new project that's done through the city, and all work in the city, frankly, emphasizes healthy interiors, learning from the pandemic, in particular the importance of indoor-outdoor relationships. Certainly as a city, we've always been a leader in green building and higher performance. So we want to make sure the new facility is able to continue to steward that leadership role. Energy reductions and passive design strategies and greening opportunities are all other aspects that our city council over the last few years has tried to emphasize. And so we certainly want to make sure that any new facility that the city would construct would represent a lot of these goals. All right, so we've set up a 2-meeting protocol here where tonight we'll be primarily receiving presentations from the 3 firms. It'll be an opportunity for our advisory group to pose questions after each presentation. We're anticipating that each team will present for approximately 20 to 25 minutes, and there will be 20 to 25 minutes remaining for Q&A. And that Q&A can be coming from the evaluation sheet, if that helps you, because we tried to lay that out with the type of analytical questions that would be most helpful. We want to refrain tonight from sort of expressing personal preferences, like I like number 2. That's not so much what tonight is about. But if a particularly, for example, if a particular entry sequence is working really well, I think that's what we want to hear. Or if it's hard to find the front door and would be challenging if that type of approach were taken, that's the type of analysis that we're hoping to hear more of. And then after the presentation, we'll sort of get together at the end of the meeting and talk about next steps. And we're going to give you a bit of a homework assignment, which is sort of individually to jot down your notes and thoughts based on that evaluation sheet. And certainly all of you have a different expertise and a different lens, so we don't expect every single aspect of the sheet to be filled out, but just in the areas where you feel most comfortable and want to comment, that's where we're looking for your sense of where the particular visions are strong or need additional work. And then we'll come back a week from now, same time, Tuesday night next week, and take your individual evaluations and discuss them collectively to see where there might be some commonalities and maybe some areas where there might be some disagreements about effectiveness of a particular approach. And at the end of meeting 2, then we will talk about those components that as the project goes forward to council and they make a selection of the design team, what are the components of the project that absolutely must be in any project going forward, regardless of the team who's selected? What would best reflect the city of West Hollywood and its needs and this particular site and its context. And I think that's the type of feedback that we're hoping that this group can provide us by the time we get to the end of the process. So with that, I want to just quickly familiarize everybody with the site itself, and we're going to jump into the presentations by the 3 firms, unless there's a question about the process.
Rick,
yes.
This is Rebecca Eman.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca. Yeah, if you could give us a little bit on the Arts Division's vision for what type of facility.
Yes, thank you.
This will be.
So quickly, just for the benefit of the group, before we jump into presentations, Rick and I discussed that it may be helpful to understand what types of programming we're envisioning at this site. So we're envisioning that the theater will be like a 99-seat equity theater. We work with a wide range of different artists, from kind of classical musicians, like a seated quartet, to a dance troupe, to theater, and everything in between. So something that allows flexibility is important. We do think that there may be opportunity in the future to potentially work with a theater troupe to maybe reside, take residence in the space for long term. But because we as the city operate in such a vacuum of a lack of cultural facilities, it's very important that this is a multifunctional playhouse performance space and really utilized for all types of different performances. And then with the addition of the square footage, we're hopeful that we can get some real usable rehearsal space as well, because often we're struggling with locating a performance troupe within the site while another performance troupe may already have it reserved. So there's competition. But anyhow, I hope that provides a little bit of context. We do anticipate this site being programmed 365 days a year. There truly is that much demand in our division with the artists we're working with.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, so just 1 minute on the brief that was given to each of the three firms. The site itself, I think you're mostly familiar with. We have an existing building with a surface parking lot adjacent. There's a curb cut off of Santa Monica Boulevard with 2 stately palm trees that you pass between. The brief allowed for this curb cut to be removed and access to the project from an alley in the rear, and that's perfectly fine. Also, this site we're looking at is an anchor for a future development for the entire block. The city does own all the property east of this parcel, and depending on how things play out in the future, there may be 1 or 2 other parcels in play. So we want to make sure that if in the future this block is developed, most likely with some sort of mixed use, certainly some housing is what we're thinking would be at least part of a development, that this would serve as an anchor. So we want to make sure that the designs can neatly stitch into some larger project in the future. All right, so is there any other questions before we jump in and hear from our 3 firms?
Andrew
Yes,
Campbell.
this
Yes,
is Andrew.
Andrew.
I'm curious, so are we considering not only the Playhouse, but also the parking spot to be part of that Playhouse structure?
Yes, so for the moment, we do need to retain access for the retailers to the east, but the parking lot is part of the project. It can be re-envisioned and reimagined, and you will see each of the 3 firms did include that. And as Rebecca said, we did give them a rough brief of spaces that they should be including. So you will see not only a performance space and rehearsal space, but some support spaces and restrooms and lobbies and other things like that. But should the council decide to go forward with an actual Playhouse project, there will be a more formal programming process. And then once a design team is selected, we will start with a community-based process to make sure that we're having as complete a facility as possible before the building actually gets designed. Any other questions, Esther?
Thanks, Rick. Quick question. Thinking about is parking required, or are there currently options for shared parking with the existing parking lot owned by the city?
I think long-term, because we have 2 parking facilities so close, that likely long-term, if this were to go forward, there might not be any parking, but we have certain lease requirements right now where we do need to keep, I believe, 5 spaces there for other tenants. And so each of the teams has integrated 5 spaces for the short term, for the purpose of this visioning, at least. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think let's get into the first team presentation. As I said, there will be a presentation and then we'll have a little Q&A follow-up. And I think I just ask everybody to raise their hand. I think might be the easiest thing for asking presenters questions afterwards. So I think Jan, you're up representing Perkins and Will. And I'll let you introduce the full team. I'm not sure if Martin or Lee is going to introduce the team. So we have a team of 3 here from Perkins and Will.
You've got all of us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Merging into evening. It's fantastic to be back talking about this Coast Playhouse. Good to see some familiar faces and a broad array of new ones as well. We're excited to be here. We think this Playhouse concept will be a vehicle to start to bring us all together, setting the stage for community both inside and out. With that, myself and Jan Krimsky, our design director, and Martin Leitner will be walking through the proposal. You'll see me at the end again, and I will turn it over to Jan.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Can I please ask permission to share my screen?
Absolutely. Garen, are you able to do that?
You should be able to share, Jan. Is it not allowing you?
Other participants are sharing.
Let's see, try that now.
There we go.
Okay,
yeah. Great.
All right. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. We're super excited to share our vision. This has been a wonderful process, and just really, really eager to get into it. We had two major goals in looking at this project. The one is theaters are typically pretty solid in terms of as a type of building. We wanted to take the urban activation beyond the marquee. This is Santa Monica Boulevard, and we challenged ourselves to figure out a way to create an active street frontage. The other thing is that we were thinking about the theater like an instrument. And in thinking about it, we kind of call it tiny but mighty, in that it does things that a basic black box theater does really, really well, but it can do some things that bigger theaters can do also. And so with those two goals in mind, I want to take you through just quickly what the topics are that we're going to talk about. I'm going to start with our site. We're going to talk about the building concept. We're going to get into the architectural expression, and then we'll end with sustainability, a look at cost, and some specialty slides that were requested by you from us. So jumping into what we call our secret sauce. This really comes from the initiation of the project, where we were asked to look at just the parcel where the current theater is at. And so this is Santa Monica Boulevard, and the current theater lays out with the blue here as the public space, and the pink and purple as the theater and the support space. And so we started to take it apart, and working with that area quickly became really frustrated because there was really no way to do it without compromising the program. There just wasn't a lot of room on the site for an entry sequence and really creating a theater that looks forward. Until we explored the idea of moving the theater upstairs. And so what we're proposing is to take all of the blue stuff, that's the public program, and move that to the street. And then all of the pink and purple then pushes to the back of the site. And so what that does is it gives us quite a bit of flexibility and creates some really interesting opportunities that we're going to share with you. Before we get into that, though, I want to make sure that everyone understands that because we did this and we put the theater on a second floor, we did not add area to the program. In fact, because we were able to stack program, we had area at the front of the site that would then allow us to create outdoor space so that you could flow from the sidewalk into an entry courtyard, and that space could then begin to activate the street. So looking at the areas here, we are actually proposing 5,042 square feet in our proposed design, but actually 1,000 square feet of that is outdoors. And we think there are some cost advantages to that. Certainly in terms of energy use, that will have a positive impact. But the biggest thing is that what it does is it activates the street, because now things like the entrance, the courtyard, the lounge, and a terrace that we've created all start to face the street and create that life and energy, really become a beacon at night and start to lighten and engage the street frontage.
Right. Good afternoon. So that brings us to that first challenge that Jan was mentioning. How do we turn a theater that by its nature isn't necessarily that active into a real urban activator? And what we really intended to do is take all of the components that we have that were in the program, from the lobby, from the box office, to the adjoining parking lot, and take all of that together and create a design and an arrangement of program that can really activate this site for large parts of the day, and really also fit into the larger context, because you all know that there's an existing context that we want to join and be a part of. Next slide, please. So as we look at this is the first view here of the front. You're on Santa Monica Boulevard looking at this frontage. As Jan said, all of the public program is right at the back of the sidewalk. And this really connects to what you in West Hollywood all have been doing on Santa Monica Boulevard. This is your main street, and the relinquishment really set you up to create one of the great urban streets in the basin. And the Santa Monica Boulevard Streetscape Master Plan really set the stage. So we want to key into that. Actually, Jan, if you could stay on that for a second. If you look at this, we really curated the ground floor in particular with a lot of opening, transparency. That brick wall is something you can look into the lounge, and then a balcony that overlooks the street, all really activating and putting the front door right where it wants to be at the back of the sidewalk. Next. We look at the site plan. This is really the full block view. You see now that we have the theater right there where the old Playhouse was, and in the pocket park and parking to the left of that, and right next to Basics. We zoom in a little more. Next, please. You can see again all of this active program right at the back of the sidewalk, a pocket park, the required parking that Rick mentioned a little earlier, an outdoor lobby, a courtyard at the ground floor, the expanded sidewalk that was possible by taking out the curb cut and just relying on the alley to provide access to that parking. All really important pieces in helping create that urban fabric that activates the sidewalk. Next, please. So as we look at this rendering, now we're kind of looking north and east. You can see how this theater really fits in and sits in this context. The trees and green, we'll get into a little more in a minute. And then next view is an evening view. And we're really imagining that whether daytime or evening, there's a lot of program that can help activate, not just from the entry, but now you're starting to see on the right there, those doors, that's the rehearsal space. And those things can start to open up and be programmed together with the pocket park. Next, please. When we first looked at this, the parking lot was kind of still there. And when we were allowed to kind of expand the building onto that, we actually purposely decided not to do that. There are a few reasons. One, we actually think that in this small footprint with the stacking that Jan described, we can create a fantastic world-class venue. But the other thing is also it allows us to control cost, and we get this pocket park opportunity that is large, that is open to the public 365 for, say, somebody to go for their lunch break, or when you don't need the parking, you open it all up and you use it for an event or a community gathering, things like that. And if we look at the next slide, you'll see that we actually have 3 potential layouts. The first one on the left is kind of your day-to-day. There's just some loose seating, some tables for people to work, to eat, do things like that. The back part is that parking area that's required. Then in the middle, you see the outdoor performance. You're playing off of the ground floor rehearsal space that we'll talk about more in a moment. And then we have this opportunity to just say a pop-up event or something, a community fair, some boards for a project review, whatever is needed. Next, please. Right, and then you kind of see this nighttime view, and what really sets up is this idea that there's a transition from the sidewalk, from the public realm into the theater. Next, please. So let's say on performance day, on the left, you're approaching, maybe you're on a scooter, maybe you're on a bike, maybe you're walking down Santa Monica Boulevard, you're approaching the entry, you enter the ground floor courtyard where the box office is, you start climbing the stair where the audience is now on stage, and then you're in this outdoor pre-function space waiting for the performance to start. Yeah.
So we're going to take you through a quick fly through of the space. Hopefully it plays well on your end. This tends to have problems sometimes. But here you can see us dropping down into that pocket park. And again, this is a well-lit and wide open space, views all across. And we slide in, moving in towards the entry courtyard. In a moment, we'll start to make our way up to the pre-function space, where you can imagine all kinds of things happening. This could be an event space in and of itself. This could be a performance space. This is a kind of urban terrace that also supports all the things that are happening at the theater. And as we fly up, crash into the brick a little bit, sorry about that, we can see how the whole thing works together in this idea of this procession up this ceremonial staircase. And our parting shot from the aerial perspective. So I want to take a step back and talk about why we wanted to emphasize innovation with our program. We did a little bit of history, and you can say that the Coast Playhouse has definitely had a colorful set of occupants and backgrounds. But one of the things that we found that was really interesting was a little bit of history on the Players Ring Theater, which was an offshoot of the Circle Theater, where way back in 1945, UCLA students got really excited about this idea of theater in the round. And so there was a connection to a kind of way of engaging the audience that had not previously been around. And this was the place where it was happening. And so that got us thinking, is there a way for us to enable that kind of flexibility? And at the same time, make sure that we've got the nuts and bolts covered. We have a really great functional black box theater that then has options to engage audiences in innovative ways. So a couple of highlights here. It's a 45 by 35 foot performance space that is totally uninterrupted for 2 stories. There's no mezzanines, there's nothing that interrupts that space. It is totally open and flexible. There is an opportunity with the way that the building stacks for trapdoors and access through floor to the rehearsal space that is stacked directly below the stage. The building is constructed from CMU block, and it's acoustically treated for really the best acoustic performance. So we didn't incorporate operable doors and things like that in the actual theater itself, very specifically so that we wouldn't compromise on the function of the black box. And it does have a larger than the program requirement rehearsal space, and we did that because we had the space to do it within the area allotment, and that space would then be larger than the stage, and so you could rehearse the full action on stage down in the rehearsal space with what we've allotted. So I want to take you through our plans quickly and briefly. We're going to start here at the entry courtyard. So here's the view as you come in from Santa Monica Boulevard into our entry courtyard. We're seeing the box office on our right, and ahead of us, a small lobby, which will have an elevator in it and restrooms. So we were standing right here a moment ago, looking at the entry courtyard. From this point, if I'm arriving and I have my tickets in hand because I got them online, I can make my way directly upstairs to see the performance, or I could go inside the lounge and use the elevator to get there. I'll end up at the same place either way. Also off the lounge, that's where I'll find 3 single occupancy restrooms. After I've got my tickets and I arrive at the terrace, here is the space where I'm hanging out and waiting for the performance to start. I also might be surprised with some performance on the outside of the building, depending on how folks choose to use it. Great place to have a drink, great place to spend a little bit of time, and a wonderful view from this height looking south from Santa Monica Boulevard. From here, I'll make my way directly into the performance space when it's time to see the performance. And so that's kind of the public route. Now moving towards the talking about how it's used by the folks that are putting on performances here. 2 ways in, one through the lounge space, and coming in through the back, I'll directly access the rehearsal space that way, or a door from the corner, which takes you to the back and access to the rehearsal space, the dressing room, the restrooms, and all that other good stuff that supports activity from the theater. To get to the stage, I have direct access via this stair here, which will take me up and directly to the stage. The other route to go is a stair that's open along the back of the building, where again, I have direct access off the stage through a vestibule, down the stairs, where I'd be able to go back inside that rehearsal space. So these are some of the flows that you might see during a performance. One of the things to point out is that from the rehearsal space, if I choose to use that as a multi-purpose area, if you choose to use it that way. There are flexible large folding doors that can open up to the pocket park that's adjacent, and that space could then also be used as a performance space. So taking you up to that, that terrace overlooking Santa Monica Boulevard, here's a view of some folks waiting for a performance to start on the right, and a performance already started with a point on the roof, a low roof that we have above a stairway, where this could be a kind of one of those ways of engaging an audience. We don't know how people will use this space. We want to leave that to the artists, but we certainly want to create as many opportunities as possible for these kind of engagements. Quick look at a section. You can see the rehearsal space directly stacked below the theater. And in the other section, again, you see that same relationship shown here. And then a look at the theater itself and looking at multiple ways that seating can be arranged with different stage configurations, seating in the round and other configurations that can be used, just demonstrating the flexibility of the form, the shape and size of that theater volume. So we also wanted to talk about loading. How do you get sets there? How do you load a lot of equipment into the space? What we didn't want to do is incorporate a second freight elevator. We want to keep the cost down. We want to keep the project feasible. So what we are proposing is that trucks would come in from the alley and actually load through the rehearsal space. Here, there would be a trap. It would be the size of a baby grand. We were told that was the number, so we used it for now. But of course, we're flexible on that. And that we would use a scissor lift to actually move large items up and down, a lift that could also be used during performances. So here we're kind of getting a twofer. We're using our connections through the stage. Also, we're using that to load scenery through the floor. The other piece of information we want to share is security. It's something that comes up quite often. How is this space secured at night? You have a public space that is a little bit harder to see into. So as an option, we provided 2 sliding doors, which could then retract. The goal here was to create the appearance of a holistic design that still felt good on the street. It didn't feel like it was gated off. And so you can see the doors then slide in from the side and give it that sort of warm glow if we choose to secure that outdoor courtyard. So I want to talk a little bit about the building expression. Why does it look the way it does? We spent a little bit of time thinking about the idea of what a theater is supposed to look like. What are the elements that you expect to see, and what things trigger that here's a place where I'm coming to experience art, I'm coming to experience performance. When we came up with this idea of the terrace at the front of the building, we instantly thought this is kind of a stage in and of itself. The people who are going to be walking up and getting ready to see the performance are, for everyone driving by and on the street, they are performers on this sort of urban theater. And once we sort of started to think about it that way, we kind of unlocked this notion that the front of the building is itself a kind of urban stage, and that is interesting and relevant expression for the architecture of the building. The green that you see draping down from the linear planter acts as a kind of curtain. And the plants that we feature themselves are emotive. We've chosen plants that are wispy or express some kind of emotion to create almost the sense of scenery that's being created on Santa Monica Boulevard. Now, we have heard concerns about the maintenance of those plants. And so we did think through how you would trim and maintain those kinds of vines. We looked at species that could be used for those kinds of vines in this climate. One thing that you see on the left is a diagram which shows the way that a planter could be lowered through a hoist or through rigging. And so that could be lowered to a point where it's easily maintained. So we like that because that has sort of the language of stage rigging, but at the same time does give you a simple way to access and maintain the plants. However, if we're not able to convince that that is a viable way to maintain greenery that high in the drawing, there are a number of other options that we can consider. We're not married to this, but we do think the metaphor of the curtain as a building frontage is important. So here's an example of a metal mesh that looks very curtain-like with lighting. It's quite elegant. Rope is certainly in the language of scenery and sets, and can be used in really elegant ways to create these kind of filigree facades, or tinted ETFE plastic. Here, the way it filters light is really beautiful. I want to end on materiality. You see this kind of brick expression on the exterior of the building. This is really about two things. One, it's about creating a kind of solid expression that we think connects to really the spirit of West Hollywood and what they're trying to do with sustainability. So the brick that we're showing is a reused brick. It gets that texture and the patina, but also because we're taking an existing building away and putting a new one in its place of the same function, we want to be conscious about our contribution to greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. So reusing a material is always a smart way to do that. So here again, we're doing two things. We're accomplishing two goals. One, we're giving this building this kind of solidity and this rusticated age and patina, but at the same time, we're able to reuse the material and avoid creating new materials to clad the building.
And from that standpoint, it goes directly into the sustainability conversation. Hopefully, you've heard throughout what Jan and Martin have presented that this is a holistic strategy, and we're looking at integrating it into every design move that we make. We joke about TFARs. In order to be able to afford the sustainability, it's got to do more than one thing. And so, you know, what are cost-effective ways to really look at whole life carbon? So for net zero operational carbon, we're talking about the compact efficient building envelope. We're proposing no on-site combustion, so all electric. We have the room and the space and the allocation for some rooftop solar, and we'd love to geek out with you and go in depth on all of these systems. But I think one of the biggest things is that move of keeping approximately 20 to 25% of the program space kind of tempered and outdoors. Not only helps lower energy use for the building, but it also improves sort of the embodied carbon conversation. If you build less, there's less carbon involved in it. And we really want to look at that whole life carbon with you. Next slide. But that's not the whole story. We know water is a precious resource here. We're really focused on water conservation and reuse, the creation of kind of these biophilic areas using, of course, low water landscape, but trying to create a localized microclimate that respects water and sort of uses it wisely. So storm, gray water irrigation, possibly toilets we can talk about. And then focused on the health of the performers. I mentioned microclimate, that's sort of about minimizing and mitigating some of the potential heat island effects around the site. But really it goes into how the interior finishes are vetted for chemicals. And last but definitely not least, the celebration of movement and art and performance that is inherent in theater. That's sort of active design as art. Next slide, please. So when it all comes together, we did vet this with an outside cost estimator. Total construction cost for what we're showing you showed about $5 million. But I think the biggest thing is this fundamental move of a tighter footprint that is insanely flexible, less skin, less structure, less foundation, less conditioned space, but more flexibility, and really a lot of options both inside and outside the walls. Next slide. And we'll just end on walking through some of the specialty slides and look forward to diving deeper.
Okay. So on the urban activation, we just want to reinforce this connection with the vision for Santa Monica, a building that activates with transparency and entries at the ground floor, that pre-function terrace that overlooks the street, and then this pocket park that's really well open, visible, can be used together with the theater or independently of it. Next slide, please. And then on the site planning, that permeability of the urban fabric is really important. That's something that you have today, and we want to maintain that. All of the activities right at the front. And then, you know, on that parking, we all know how much space and resources parking often uses in our cities. We really wanted to make sure that for this project, we focus the resources on the theater and make that parking space as flexible as possible for all those times when we don't need to park cars there.
With the programming, it was about getting the basics right, a versatile black box theater that really focuses on fantastic performances, but at the same time thinking about a really engaging experience for people who are coming to watch these performances, with the forecourts in the front, the urban terrace, and those engagements between.
For sustainability, you just heard, but when you bring the whole story together, it's about the environment, it's about humans, it's about understanding where West Hollywood is in the conversation on carbon and looking toward the future. Next slide. And last but definitely not least, constructability. Can it be built? This tiny but mighty theater, we talked about compact and efficient. It is buildable now, but it layers in enough flexibility to ensure kind of a resilient resource that will continue to inspire as Santa Monica Boulevard and other properties change around it. While we are proposing a CMU structure, we're integrating things like mass timber and reclaimed material elements that are very available, regionally available, and familiar to work with in this volatile landscape of procurement at the moment. Some tempered outdoor program space, we mentioned, saves construction costs, lowers energy use, creates an outside place environment. And then structural costs and carbon are contained with some of these key structural moves. Less load on roof trusses, smaller foundations. Once again, we can geek out as much as you would like about some of the details. But I think the last thing we wanted to point out is by preserving that permeable pocket park / parking that Martin described, sort of a ready-made staging area on site, and particularly as the shifts are happening along Santa Monica Boulevard, it offers you flexibility on the outside as well as the inside. And I think with that, we have concluded the presentation, but we very much look forward to question and answer and to basically continuing the journey.
Well, great. Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. And it's so helpful to hear the thought that is behind the design itself. So we have about 20 minutes for members of our advisory group to pose some questions and dive deeper into any areas that they would like to. So if anybody wants to start the conversation off, let me see if anybody's raising their hand at this point. I'm not seeing anybody. There we go, Andrew Campbell, thank you.
Well, all I can say is wow to start with. I had a couple of questions. One dealing, I mean, I really love the idea that you're including rehearsal space in there. That's absolutely needed. I'm a little concerned though about the load-in process and the scissor lift concept. I guess because that's just one mechanical thing that could go wrong. I also have a question about the backstage area and how that would be demarcated so that actors would be able to make their entrances and exits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the scissor lift. You know, this idea actually came to us through some experienced theater designers who said, you know, this is something that we've done in the past. The reason we've done it is because these scissor lifts are actually quite versatile. They're inexpensive and they're easy to operate. So yeah, it is definitely one more mechanical thing that can break. So is an elevator though. So all of these things have potential to break down, but scissor lifts are quite common. We could integrate it into the floor in such a way where it's really flexible and doesn't interrupt any of the functioning of the space, or we could potentially give you one that is mobile so it can be driven in and out, but it gives you a number of different options without making things more complicated by introducing a second freight elevator. However, I will say this, there is a freight elevator in the project. We imagine during performances, this is the kind of freight elevator that you see at LACMA, for example. It's going to get a whole bunch of people up at once. It's in the bottom left of the screen right now. But at the same time, if you're loading scenery in, you could potentially take it in through the freight and move it up and in through the front doors of the theater. So there's a number of different options for you to work that way. In terms of the question about backstage, I'm going to take us to a floor plan. And what I will say for that is that the way that we thought about the stage really is that it is actually the entire room is flexible. We actually don't know where backstage is because the stage might be in the middle or it might be along the side. What we do have is access from the stairs connecting to the spaces downstairs, rehearsal spaces and changing rooms on either corner here. And so we imagine that that is really part of the performance and establishing how you want the performance to work. So that backstage scenario could change depending on how the stage is set up. Again, this is really a flexible black box.
Great. Lindsay, I think you're next, followed by Martin.
Hi, thanks for taking my questions. I'm going to stay right there.
Okay.
All right. So just for a practical matter, it appears to me with that lack of space at the top of the stairs, except for that one side that you have, I think, is that on the east side of the building? The top? Yeah, that.
Mm-hmm.
It would not be possible for a large group to enter at once, or from both sides. And it appears to me that irregardless, you're asking performers to walk upstairs to go to the show. Correct?
Yes, unless they,
Okay.
well, no, because we have to be accessible. So there is a way to take the elevator and access the show.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to Andrew's original question, there's not a way for an entrance to not be public oriented or be public facing. It appears that's my short, look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Would I have to walk in front of other of the audience to get on stage?
If you were to take the elevator, currently,
Uh-huh.
we don't have provisions for that. Now,
Okay.
let's leave it at that. I think that's a straightforward answer.
Okay.
And something that isn't hard and fast, right? Something that we would definitely be considering. And if that was a real issue, there's plenty of room to accommodate another elevator.
Okay. Well, I think what certainly to accommodate those performers who are not able to go upstairs is going to be really and their equipment, whether it be a double bass or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I also echo Andrew's question regarding just freight in general. Is there an allowance at all for a workshop or construction of anything, or are you expecting everything to be built off site and trucked in?
Well, the rehearsal space is, again, it's larger than we were asked to provide, and that could be a workshop and has that direct access to the stage, the theater above it. So that is the provision for that.
Thank you.
Martin, followed by Elaine.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for presentation of a very beautiful project that I think you're right will address the street in a very active and wonderful way. I don't have any questions per se, just a few thoughts. I still think that the parking is kind of an elephant in the room. And I think in the event that parking can in the future be accommodated somewhere else, say in the project to the east, that we should think about the possibility of having an expandable project in the light and with the possibility that we can incorporate some of this space to the east of what we have now. Also, I want us to think about the inclusion of some art exhibit space in this project. I think it's we don't have a good exhibit space in the city now. This is not only a theater center, but an art center. And I think that it's important, whether it's included in a lobby of some kind or mixed use space, or certainly not the theater. But I think that's something we want to consider. And I also want to echo the thought about the access, especially for a disabled performer who wants to get up into the performance space, they shouldn't have to go out to the exterior elevator. So those are my first thoughts. Thank you very much.
Elaine, followed by Brian.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. It is a beautiful project. A couple of comments, and I'll echo a little bit of some of the comments of fellow commissioners. The staircase is a real focal point of this project, but if you are disabled, your experience is going to be very different. So something to think about just as a focal point. I share Lindsay's concern with the ability of moving large numbers of people, 99 people in and out pre and post performance, and also if there's an intermission. The restrooms are on the first floor, correct?
That's correct.
So if performers need to use the restrooms, they are accessing it from the stairs and coming back up to the stage area?
That's correct.
Okay. And same with the public. So they're gonna, if you have to go to the restroom, you're gonna have to go downstairs during intermission or pre or post event to do that.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. The facade of the building, while there is a certain amount of transparency on the Santa Monica Boulevard side, it is right up to the sidewalk. So you're essentially achieving your setback through the pocket park. Is that right?
So achieving our setback through the pocket park. Let me make sure I understand the question.
Well, there is no setback. You're right up against the
That's
side.
true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
So your open space and whatever setbacks you might want to achieve through this project would be through the pocket park.
That's correct.
Okay.
And our entry court.
And the entry court. Okay.
Mhm.
And I also share some of the concerns with the lift. That was the first note that I made as you were presenting. It may be very doable, but it also may be challenging. I don't know enough. That's not my area of expertise, but it's just something that kind of caught me as you were going through it. So I'll leave that to more of the experts. But thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Brian, followed by Esther.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I think this is a really unique way to approach this site. I actually really like the idea of the urban stage and this urban terrace, dissolving that front facade so the garden carries into the footprint of the building a little bit. I would question maybe some of the vertical circulation in things that are happening, especially this stair leading up that is cutting off that pocket park. To me, that's a missed opportunity to actually let this new park that you've developed to not spill into the building or have some orientation of that stair as a terrace to that garden. I think it's something that would be worthy of looking at. I mean, ultimately what you've done is by giving up this front park area, this park terrace, you've taken away that sort of back of house area off the back of your stage, your load in and that piece of it. And I'd like you to just, because it's something that's come up a little bit, I'd like you to speak a little bit more as to why you think this urban terrace is an advantage over that back of house area, which is so important for the functionality of a stage, the load in, the staging, the set piece of it. Because I think that is the biggest difference between your presentation and others we'll see, is that decision formally to organize the building in that way. And I'd like to give you that opportunity to talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. It gets to the heart of our approach, which is that the site itself isn't very wide. It's about as wide as you want to make the theater. The current theater is a little bit too small. And so what we did is take, again, we're looking at just the one site that the current theater is on. And what we did was we took that entire site for the theater, and we did want to create that public space and that experience of going to the theater. We wanted to put emphasis and priority on that. We kind of felt like this is a sketch, right? This is the beginnings of an idea that we will have many conversations about how this thing works. But what we wanted to put forward to you was an idea about going to theater, the experience of going to theater. And even at this scale, can we do some things that really celebrate the act of seeing theater? And so this idea of the stair, the idea of terrace, which you keyed in on, those are all sort of primary importance to us, which drove us to push the theater all the way to the back of the site. And then so that we didn't have to compromise on the size of it, we took the entire space. We did that by putting all the support functions underneath it, which means that it's true, everything is connected by stairs. And if that's an unsolvable problem, I think that this is probably not a good way to go, honestly. I think if we can put our heads together and figure out how to make that functional, whether it's adding a lift to support some of the issues that have come up, then I think this is a really special way and a really unique way to think about urban theater, this kind of vertical stacking. And I think it's also a really economic way to do it. I think this becomes a more feasible project when you don't spread out across a larger site.
Great. Esther, followed by Lindsay.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks again for a really beautiful presentation. And I'll try to phrase these as questions. But I'm curious, you talked a lot about urban activation of the street. During the daytime, assuming that there's performances, we heard 365 days of the year, but if those are not happening, let's say from 9 a.m. until maybe, I don't know, 5 p.m., what is the active, how does the project activate the street during those non-performance hours?
If I may jump in there, as we're talking through the program and looking at the program brief, what was really important was that obviously this is a theater and the theater is the core program, but that you have so many other needs for various types of program that could fill many of those hours, right? So we have the entry courtyard, as Jan pointed out, with lobby that could be used for small events, for showing a project, for showing art. We have the ground floor rehearsal space, which is very sizable. And especially if you compare it to today's Playhouse, where the rehearsal space is on the second floor and completely inaccessible in many ways. This now is something that you can open up to the pocket park, to the public realm, and use as a community space, as a space for readings and things like that. So there's a lot of that. Then there's the second floor outside that again is another space that could be used for multiple purposes. So you have all of these programming opportunities. That said, I think the one other thing that you have in this design is that you do have this pocket park that is open, and that City Hall is right across the street for lunch breaks, for things like that. You can have people there and enjoy that space. So between all of those things, I think there's a lot of programming opportunities that you have, a lot of flexibility built in, and you have this open space that now goes from only being a parking lot to being at least 50% an actual public space for people.
So I'll just follow that up with a question about, as our climate becomes hotter and hotter, I've probably all been listening to what's going on in London, and hopefully, we are here a little bit cooler. Luckily, we're a lot cooler today than London, but assuming this is the direction we're heading in the next 50 years, how would you make that outdoor space habitable during those daytime hours?
So, I mean, a lot of it has to do with shade. One of the things you do have here is you have shade going for you. We have vegetation on the upper level, especially if we go with a planting solution. That's a real opportunity to create microclimate, bring some moisture. I think the other thing that you'll see, and again, if we could get, we can talk about that parking. There's more and more we can do when we don't need like a firmly paved area to store cars on. Taking that language of the foyer and the stair out into that, and then planting. There are 2 existing palm trees. We're not actually proposing new palm trees; those are existing. But really making sure that we reduce, and you can also see a DG area, reduce really the concrete contributes so much to the heat in the urban environment.
Let me just add on to that. I think there was a clear, first of all, the building itself is green and entirely shaded. So promoting breezes with airflow and having all the greenery in there we think that space is going to be really comfortable. The pocket park that we're proposing, that is all about shade, but we are looking at a DG surface so that we're not reflecting heat and on the tables that are there. And then we also don't want to contribute to more greenhouse gas emissions and more global warming. And that's why there's an emphasis on timber, the use of timber, and the recycled materials.
And just to,
Okay.
to add a bit, if that's okay. So Esther, I think we're looking at shade and then really capitalizing on some of these wins. So as we're approaching this, there's kind of these micro studies about local environment that we would want to do. Just to make sure we're hitting on the right places and using all the levers we can. I know right now the crossroads is going to shade a bit, but if that goes away, like how do we kind of incorporate vegetation and building and let the building itself kind of play a part in that.
Okay.
And if you tell us that you only need 4 parking stalls, we would just love to push that pocket park all the way back. We're given a brief where we needed to fit 5. So that is the result of that brief. So just to point out, we would love to have more of that soft surface on this pocket park.
Yeah, great. All right, we have maybe 3 minutes. So Lindsay and Uzair, you will have the last 2 comments or questions, and then we'll move to our next presentation.
Okay, great. I want to follow up on both Esther and Brian's comments and then add. I have seen second floor black box theaters work very well, okay? And with stair access with bathrooms downstairs. Within the last 2 years, I've been working in a building that looks exactly like that. But it's got a much more activated front of house. Instead of having an actual box office and lobby like that, they turned it into a cabaret. And you go through a gated courtyard right there into their open space, which has a garage door that opens up. The box office is tucked in because most people are doing electronic anyway, so it's not formal. There's just a cash register and a person there with a bar and a piano. And then the stairs go up the other side. There's rehearsal space, offices, and all of that. But back to Brian's comment, you're robbing us of needed space to work in. And so if you've got such a limited footprint, I'd much rather, as a creator, give me back my space to work in. You know, let the public go use the garden downstairs or in another park. Let me work. Thank you.
Okay, Uzair, final comment.
Thank you. And just thank you to the Perkins Will team. This is, an amazing presentation, very creative. We all know that these are early iterations and much feedback to receive. So I just wanted to put in a few quick notes. Would just love to see a capacity study on 3 restrooms in a 99-seat theater with quick turns on intermissions. I think there was a risk that the team took to shrink the building footprint and reduce costs. And I think that the team at Perkins Will totally understands that cost is often a limiting factor. And so I think that this is an amazing way to reduce the amount of conditioned space and the expensive space. So I do appreciate that and do appreciate the risk of putting the theater on the 2nd floor because we understand that there's lots of constraints around that. So just want to express the appreciation to the team.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we want to echo that from a staff perspective. The amount of thought and care that's gone into this vision, and even though it is a sketch, it's a really well thought out sketch. And so thank you so much to the Perkins and Will team. And we will be moving on now to our next presentation.
Thanks, Rick, and everyone.
Okay with the group.
Thank you all for your comments.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay, if it's okay with the group, we'll just move on to the second one and then we'll take a break after the second one if that works for everybody. Okay, good. All right, so let us introduce our second team this evening from Bar Architects. We have Zach Prouda and Alex Hovo, who's joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your vision with us for the Playhouse tonight. And so Zach and Alex, if you're ready to go, I'll turn it back over to you. And you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, 1 second.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Alexandra is going to share her screen. So
okay.
As you're pulling that up, I will get going and just thank you for welcoming us and having us this evening. This was a really terrific design exercise to take place in, and we've been enjoying the ride. For those of you who don't know BAR, we're a 55-year-old California design practice with a few different expertise, one of which is performing art spaces. We've designed a number of performing art spaces for mime, music, and theater. We're currently working on converting the Crest Theater in Westwood to the Nimoy Theater for UCLA. And then sort of on the other side of that spectrum, we have a significant amount of experience in mixed use infill development. And I think it's through these two lenses that we've really started thinking about this project, because it is a little bit of each. My name is Zach Prouda. I am the studio director for our Los Angeles studio and a partner with the firm. My career has been focused in a number of market sectors, but primarily the sort of link through all of those has really been about collaborating with clients and cities and communities to create really great urban life and urban space. What we're going to present to you today represents just some initial ideas for the Playhouse. Hopefully it demonstrates a vision for how we see the Playhouse being an exciting venue for the arts, but also a catalyst for urban placemaking. Our work was really based on our first instinct, which was to, through ideas instead of solutions, find a scheme, come to a scheme that premise was really about creating a project that was a beacon for the community. And with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Alexandra.
Hello, my name is Alexandra Havel, and I work with Zach over at BAR. My background is architecture and urban design, and restoring and enhancing the urban fabric of LA has been a main focus of my career. I'm an LA native, and I'm also a resident of West Hollywood. As Zach mentioned, our approach to design at BAR has always been collaborative, our biggest collaborator being the community and people we're designing for. So located in the center of WeHo, being right off one of the busiest community-centric thoroughfares in the city, the Playhouse site bears a lot of cultural weight, and it's always been a place people have been drawn to. The stretch of roadway has held an importance within the local region and state for almost a century, and it's rare to find a street in LA with so much continuous street activation and commerce. What's so amazing about Santa Monica Boulevard, and this stretch in particular, you know, it's full of life. You have both neighbors and visitors alike walking around, enjoying the eclectic offerings. You have a lot of cafes and restaurants and shops in this location and City Hall. You know, there's always something to do here, but there's really no main draw. You know, further down Santa Monica, you've got that new rec center that's adding to an already very active node. While up here next to the Playhouse site, this piece of Boulevard may have more streetlights than most in LA, we still feel that there's some room for improvement. This particular block is a bit underutilized. Activity is slightly discontinuous, and you're pulled to the west or east more so, but not to this particular block. As you're approaching from either direction on Santa Monica Boulevard, the Playhouse site is visible, but there's a need to generate more attention from passersby without eclipsing the existing streetscape experience. And how can we draw attention to this section of Santa Monica and see the Playhouse? We thought about doing this by carving out a street-facing courtyard, creating a mid-block corner, which allows the Playhouse to have more visibility And it sort of creates this eddy in the pedestrian activity, pulling people in and generating street life right here. And this is an initial rendering of our team's playhouse in the street. And Zach's going to talk more about the design concept, but before he does, notice how the second level pulls out at an angle and wraps around the courtyard, which lets the marquee run along its bottom edge to be visible from both the east and west as vehicles come around that bend in Santa Monica Boulevard.
So we will get into the plans and the programming and how all of this works functionally in a second, but we wanted to put this image up on the screen to really just talk about where our ideas came from. And they're really inspired by what we've been discussing internally, this idea of West Hollywood modernism for the people, which to us means gracious outdoor rooms, clean forms, some horizontal expression, an interplay of solid and void, welcoming public realm, something that's a building that's human scaled, has equitable use amongst artists, and is fundamentally through architecture an expression of potential and optimism. And so those were sort of the guiding goals that we had in creating the form making that you're seeing here. As Ali noted, in this view, you can see the theater itself enclosing this outdoor space, this outdoor room and forecourt. And then in the foreground, what you're seeing, and we'll show you in plan in a second, is some sidewalk improvements that we've proposed. So from a site plan perspective, we've located the theater on the west side of the site. The sort of big partie move was to take the parking and have it accessed from the rear, freeing up the east parcel for programmed use. In this case, what we're showing is the outdoor court on the east side, sort of backdropped by a concessions area and box office. And then out at the street, we're proposing pulling the curb out, providing a street side pocket park that's a continuation of the forecourt that's on the property. And then continuing that sidewalk extension all the way down to the intersection to provide some sidewalk dining opportunity for the tenant to our west. And if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the projects that we've designed in the public realm, starting on the right-hand side of the page where we're proposing an inset in that bulb out for Uber and passenger drop-off. In front of our project, the sidewalk parklet, and then the dining space all the way to the left.
I'm just going to go back to the site plan real fast, talk about the planting scheme. The landscape design includes native shrubs, flowering plants, and canopy trees that provide an urban habitat for local birds, bees, and butterflies. We have a permeable ground covering, allowing rainwater to be absorbed back into the ground, recharging the aquifers below. An underground cistern allows rainwater runoff from the building to be collected and used to help irrigate the landscaping, which crosses over the sidewalk, as Zach mentioned, expanding the pedestrian space and creating areas for seating, planting, congregating, maybe before or after an event. And it really helps activate this area even when the theater is not in use. Additional street trees could be added to accompany these benches, or you could omit a street tree to really announce the entrance of the court. And let me just go back.
So as you saw in the rendered view, we're proposing a two-story structure. So starting on the ground floor, just to orient everybody with Santa Monica Boulevard, page south, the forecourt obviously clearly shown. The theater number 2 is a 1,900 square foot space with direct connection to that forecourt. So one of our ideas was to use the forecourt as an outdoor lobby, reducing the square footage, the program square footage needed to be conditioned. The items 3 and 4 at the north end of that forecourt are a box office and a pop-up service window. The idea really being that even when the theater is not in use, the space could be leased out to a pop-up restaurant or somebody servicing some sort of concession through that window as a way to activate the plaza during daytime hours, or during nighttime hours in the pre and post show time frames. Connected to the theater space is, of course, the green room in the upper left. We're showing a door for load-ins from the alley, a trash room on the alley, and then vertical circulation, both an elevator and stair up to a second level. Before we go up there, though, I should note that we are denoting a screening element here and here, and a sliding screen to allow the forecourt to either be closed off at night for security reasons, but it could also be closed off during performance if sort of ticketed entry wanted to happen at curb. So if we go up to the upper level, we've put our support spaces on the upper level. We're showing a gender inclusive restroom with sinks sort of draped in a green vegetated indoor space. To the south, number 15 is the rehearsal space. This is what we've sort of conceived as being part of the marquee. And so sort of the idea of occupying the marquee for the rehearsal uses, making the rehearsals visible during daytime when those are happening. Both the rehearsal space and the tech room, room 17, both have windows down into the main theater space. And the second egress stair at the bottom of the page can also be used as a way, if the rehearsal space is being used maybe as a separate rented out space, or at the same time as an event going on in the theater, it could be accessed separately. We know that flexibility in a playhouse like this is critically important to equity. Obviously, not all artists can afford the same space. And so to create an architecture that allows for a variety of different configurations was important to us, to create perhaps like a menu of price points that artists could buy into to use the space. So the primary function, of course, the 1,900 square foot theater, which can be laid out in a variety of ways. It's just a flexible black box theater. So whether it's in the round, set up for a reading or dance or music, with the wall closed off to the forecourt. We go to the next page, opportunity where the wall between the forecourt and the theater dissolves, creating extended theater space, either for seating, but we can also imagine the space being used as a voting center or a place for community meetings. The idea being that when you extend the theater and maybe you don't have the same acoustics as a black box theater provides, that there's still opportunity for use of that combined greater space. And then lastly, some pockets on the second floors, allowing the use of the space to happen simultaneously, whether that's in the rehearsal room for a more intimate gathering. Outside the bathrooms, there's a belvedere overlooking the forecourt that could be used for outdoor readings and the like, for people sitting down in the forecourt and the presenter up on the second floor balcony. If you go to the next sheet, This is a view from the theater looking back towards the forecourt to give you sort of a sense of the scale and intimacy of the space.
A couple opportunities for public art. I know in this rendering we have a mural by a local artist, but possibly there's a sculptural element or maybe something that occurs in that public, the sidewalk extension. There's a lot of opportunities and we're looking forward to exploring them. Okay, we're gonna jump to more technical things now. When it comes to sustainability, this Playhouse includes both active and passive measures to reduce energy use. Solar panels installed on the roof feed back into the power grid and offset energy used during performances. During rehearsals and off hours, an abundance of natural light coming into the space further reduce energy consumption. Larger interior volumes can be energy intensive to cool, but by facing the theater towards the forecourt, we're limiting solar heat gain while allowing fresh air from outside to circulate through the space. Vents in the floor provide cool air in the lower portion of the theater volume where the audience is, limiting the need to condition the entire theater. This also eliminates ductwork from the ceiling grid, allowing greater flexibility for lighting and audio-visual rigging. Above the stage, gaps in the ceiling draw hot air out to the vents in the roof. And at the second level, where glazing is most prevalent, screening elements reduce the amount of direct sunlight coming into the building. And through these strategies, we believe a net zero project could be pursued. When we set out to design this community playhouse, here we are in the midst of material and resource shortages. I guess the need to design around simpler assemblies and material types that are more available regionally has really guided a lot of the decisions our team made. Given the volatility of construction materials, availability, and price, we decided to produce a scheme that can be adjusted based on what materials are more cost-effective and available at the moment. We've got a simple framing system, very straightforward massing. The lattice screening element is probably the most complicated component, but it could readily be designed and assembled by local craftsmen, adding a homegrown bespoke element to a building with more than a few nods to regional design cues. Our springboard floor sits over a sunken foundation slab, but it doesn't require much excavation depth in order for the air plenum design to be placed below it to function well. And we feel the court would make for a nice construction staging area, but there may be some tightness accessing the back side of the site given the existing businesses to the east. And we'd probably want to keep any deliveries at the front given the tightness off Flores. With a small urban site like this one, there are bound to be more than a few logistical hurdles, but we feel it's all very doable. Here we have our daytime rendering again, and you can see these monolithic walls that might be poured from concrete, could also just as easily be CMU or framed walls, thicker finished in cement plaster. The accordion doors add a very striking element, allowing the seamless connection between the indoor and outdoor experiences. They're highly sound rated and insulated to block street noise from getting into the theater when they're closed during performances, but more cost-effective systems could be explored. Zach?
Yeah, additionally, excuse me, additionally, you can see that the architectural palette during the day is pretty muted. We've tried to keep colors and materials in a lighter hue to really create a subtle backdrop to the public space. And if we go to the next view, you can see that at night, we try to pump it up and create a little bit more drama through a lighting scheme. So through some just subtle LED strips on the upper levels and constellation of portals along the main frontage looking into a stairwell, we're able to add some decoration and jazz, so to speak, to the frontage. It should also be noted that one thing we are interested in doing, especially at night, was sort of flipping the concept of a theater being an enclosed black box, sort of hidden from the street, on its head. And so by illuminating the interior spaces in the mezzanine level at night, we're really able to create a beacon and demonstrate activity to the general public and people walking by. Ali, is there anything you want to add to this image?
No, I think you said it well.
In that case, that wraps up the presentation. We'd be happy to take questions and really interested in hearing everyone's thoughts.
Great. Thanks so much, Zach and Alexandria, for your presentation. Really, it's striking to see how each of these visions came from a different place, and I'm excited to hear the thoughts of our advisory group. So I see Brian first, followed by Andrew Campbell.
So first of all, really great work. I especially like how you're folding the life of the sidewalk into the site and creating this park space that connects inside outside. My first questions are hopefully really simple ones, but I apologize if I missed them. What's the square footage of this building?
The conditioned is about 4,700.
And what percentage, what's your building efficiency? What percentage of that is circulation space versus usable square footage?
You know, we haven't done that calculation. The theater itself is 1,900. The Black Box Theater is 1,900. But the part of the reason why we haven't done that calculation is a lot of the inefficient spaces that we have, we're trying to do double duty on them. But it would be interesting to look, because especially the second floor, there's definitely some excess space that could be carved out.
Could you talk about that double duty that you just mentioned and how you see that working and what spaces are functioning in multiple ways?
Yeah, sure. So I think the ground floor, there's obviously the theater, and then the box office and concession and the green room, which are the main programmatic spaces. The poche space really just being that very small entry circulation space and stair up to the upper level. Where I'm talking about double duty, it's primarily on the upper level and trying to create sort of these ideas of belvederes. So using the circulation space as potential sort of stage space, if you will. I guess that's what I meant by double duty.
And is that corridor, is that interior or exterior?
That's exterior. That's exterior, with the idea that the screen is then shading the glass. So it's a balcony space.
Yeah, I think that answered my questions. I do have some other questions about the function of the back of house, but I have a feeling that Lindsay's about to bring up her comments on that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, so Andrew, followed by Lindsay.
Okay, well, we might have the same questions, Lindsay. And I was wondering about the load-in possibilities, and maybe I missed that a little bit. I think the idea of having the parking behind the theater is kind of interesting, and that would also allow for there maybe be a roll-up door that could access it's already there.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Alex.
Idea. We actually have two opportunities for loading. One from the back. A larger opening could be accommodated. For simplicity, we just made it a simple 4.0 door. You could also bring stuff in through the front if you wanted to load. If you wanted to park off of Santa Monica.
Yeah, I'd be concerned about that a little bit because Santa Monica is so busy. But anyway, What is the height inside the theater? It looks like it's open, so it's almost, is it 2-story?
The height there's two different heights in the theater because of the mezzanine space. So the what I would kind of call the fly loft area, almost the double height space. Ali, can you remind me? That's about 20 feet, correct?
Correct.
And then the lower space is, I believe, 11 or 12.
Yeah.
So that may be a challenge if you're trying to do different configurations. Having a lower ceiling at one point and then a higher ceiling at the other.
Yeah, no, it definitely orients the room a bit relative to the ceiling tech, and any pipe grid in the ceiling would definitely want to happen over the higher volume space.
Okay, thank you.
And Lindsay, I think you're speaking, but you're muted.
No, I'm just talking to myself.
Oh.
So, my goodness gracious, Bar. First of all, I want to thank you for clicking off all of my boxes as a producer and a director, and having so much thought. I'm turning off my AC about who actually works there. You know, let's just start that. Okay, I'm really grateful for that consideration. I love the accordion doors. I've been in spaces and they work really, really functionally. I was just in National Sawdust in Brooklyn last month, and it's a similar space like this in that there is a balcony or mezzanine area with a control box up there. They don't have enough room to do anything else at that space, but the box below looks exactly like this. And it seems to be very functional for them. And I adore that you have a door and a green room and a bathroom for the performers right there. It's so important and meaningful. I echo the load-in. It really can't come in on Santa Monica at all. That would never really be an option if you're loading in a 26 or a 52-foot truck. It'd have to come in the alley. And I have questions about floors. So if we have a dance company, is the floor that they work on the floor that's built in to the theater, or how do you see that happening?
It's a raised spring box floor. So we've been assuming that it's, it's installed, but it's flexible, and that if a dance company comes in and has requirements, that rental, it'd have to be a rental, but it could take place.
Okay, so you'd bring that in for them to work on.
Or they would bring it, I guess. I don't know how the,
It would be brought in. Okay, it would be brought in. What about in the rehearsal spaces? Would there be an opportunity to have a dance floor, in the rehearsal space?
We had not thought about that, but that's a great question.
Okay, I love how versatile that rehearsal space is, and thank you for going to the second floor, because I had some questions about it as well. Is that X that's right below 16 and next to 14, is that your elevator?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And are these doors or windows that open up from 15 and 17? Is that how that works into the space below?
Yeah, do you want to describe that, Ellie? You there?
They do look out onto the space. Originally, when we were working on this concept, we did not have windows looking from the rehearsal space down into the staging area, but we thought it was kind of dynamic to have this connection. And one of the principals at BAR actually came up with this really interesting idea that we didn't talk about because we don't know how it really works yet. But the idea was that, if you close these doors off and this actually opened up, then this becomes a second perch or stage. And maybe there's some sort of connection between indoor and outdoor. I don't know how that works. I can't imagine that performance, but yeah.
Well, one of the things that was at Sawdust is so there was a balcony space in which a lot of performances happened from. You know, people sung from up there or played from up there. And so if there was an opening from 15, there's a couple of things. You could sell more seats for some events.
Yep.
Okay, start there.
Or VIP seats.
Or whatever, yeah. I mean, but there's more space for audience members, but also for engaging. And is 18, okay, 18 is all electrical. Okay. Is there a way that you could make 10 electrical and then that 18 also be a space that might open up to that second floor?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, you know, going back to Brian's comments about sort of the efficiency, perceived efficiency of this level, I think there's a lot of different ways to maneuver program here.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for all of your work. It's really exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
So Esther, followed by Elaine.
Thanks. Really interesting presentation. And while you have this floor up, I have to ask you about the restrooms on the second floor, because I have a feeling you have some very intentional thought behind this space, because they don't look like maybe the conventional restrooms that you encounter, you know, sometimes, or what, you know, I feel like there's a hint, there's something more to this. So could you talk about your ideas behind this space?
Just in terms of how it's laid out, the restrooms themselves.
I guess I'm not really the functionality. I get that. I mean, there's some approach there, but there's a lot of connectivity between this and the kind of, you know, what could be a kind of pre-function or social space. Can you talk a little bit more about how you envision what's going on up there?
Yeah, what's going on up there? Well, I think starting from the place of incorporating a gender inclusive restroom, we felt like it was, and starting from the place of a program which creates pulses of restroom needs, pre-show, intermission, post-show. We thought it was important to give both visual connectivity and just space to occupying. I think we've all been in line at a show, talking to someone you've never spoken with before about, you know, the amazing concert you've just seen, or the talented vocalist on stage, or whatever it is. So to create that circulation space for that to happen was sort of the primary reason why it got configured the way it did. Alexandra, do you have anything to sort of, I know you were working on this quite a bit. Do you have anything to add?
All that is that the stalls themselves are very private. They're separate rooms. There's no gap at the top or bottom. So when you're in them, you do not feel that like you're in the middle of somebody's party. But what I do love is that we've given room for social activities, whether it be, I don't know if I can draw right now, up here, or, you know, here, or maybe you spill out here. And you know, when I go to a performance with my girlfriends, we typically all go to the restroom together, and it becomes kind of a social thing. So to provide space for that activity to happen is, you know, it's kind of nice.
The other thing I will add is, you know, what we're assuming is that all these walls are low, kind of counter height walls. So the idea that you could be washing your hands, you know, there could be a suspended mirror or something, but you could be washing your hands and having a conversation with somebody that's out in that space.
That's exactly kind of what I was hoping for. And then I guess one other question, you talked about the importance of community collaboration. What would, you know, at this point, with these ideas you're throwing out, which we know are really just kind of sketches, what are you looking for feedback from? What do you think that community collaboration will bring to the project at this point?
Well, we've been, for better or for worse, from a design perspective, we've definitely been operating in a bubble. And the way we practice architecture, that's not how we typically practice it. And so in terms of community collaboration, we would love to see, you know, some workshops. We'd love to partner with, to just get feedback, both with stakeholders and the community. But then, as Alexandria mentioned, relative to the mural wall and relative to the screen, I think there's really tremendous opportunity to partner with local craftspeople and local artists in West Hollywood to help create some really impactful pieces of the architecture. I mean, I know that we've shown in that rendering a concept for the screen, but I think the hope would be that through collaboration with some artists that we could come up with something really unique and special.
Esther, did you have any other questions?
I'm going to cede my time to Elaine Polchak.
All right, wonderful. Elaine, followed by Brian.
Thank you, Esther. Could you please go back? First of all, thank you for the presentation. Could you please go back to the floor plan that you just had up? So I'm trying to, no, the second slide. What is the space kind of around 21? So it goes from, it curves around the space from the stairs all the way around to the restroom. That whole space, is it open? Is it, I mean, there's some vertical things that you see from the street level, but what is it? Is it an enclosed or open space?
Go ahead, Alexandra.
Space. It's a balcony hallway. We saw a building that had a similar feature, and there's actually, Zach, would you mind if I jump around?
No,
there's a photograph that I think illustrates what the usage would be like. You can kind of see, you can walk around. It allows you to come down this stairway and then just circle back and come down this one. And this image right here kind of illustrates what we were thinking it would be like.
So the vertical elements are wood or something like this, but it's open. It's open to.
It's open. And originally we had an internal corridor that was creating some issues for us to get to that egress stair. And through some conversations with the city, we decided to eliminate that and really turn the balcony both into an outdoor balcony, but also a path of egress.
And so there is enough space there to potentially utilize that for, you see people, so they'll stroll around and just walk about space.
Yep. And then it's also, since it's all unconditioned space, that screen is then providing shade to the building envelope.
Got it. And back to the floor plan, can you give us a rough idea how big the rehearsal space is, please? By square footage? 15?
Yeah, it is, if you give me just 1 second, it's about 400 square feet.
Okay. 400.
Kind of including that little dog leg area. So, a little less than that.
It should be slightly larger if the doors are fully open. But we have heard that the noise coming in from Santa Monica might not be ideal when you're rehearsing.
Right. Okay. Okay, those are my questions. Thanks so much. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Brian, I see your hand, and I think we have maybe time for one last question.
Well, I think that this is going to be an easy one that I just noticed when you had the site plan open a minute ago. You're also proposing that you're cantilevering over the public right of way. Could you talk about that just a little bit? And am I reading those drawings correctly that you're going over the property line with this?
You are reading that correctly. Do you want me to answer that, Alexandra, or do you want to?
You can answer it.
Okay. I mean, the idea there was in creating the forecourt, we had a corner opportunity, and we felt like it was really important to capitalize on that from a visibility standpoint along as you're coming down in either direction, really, along Santa Monica Boulevard. The building typology for a lot of that stretch is sort of those 1 and 2 story. It's great, but it's architecturally a little bit monotonous. And so the idea of breaking that street plane a little bit, and especially with a piece of civic architecture coming out and announcing itself, we felt like was justified.
Great. And one last question on the square footage, and then I'll not bother you anymore. But this one is bugging me just a little bit. What's the square footage of your bathrooms?
The square footage of my bathrooms is, I do not know that off the top of my head, but it is kind of inclusive of the circulation space and the stalls. It's about 750 to 800 square feet, and depending on how you look at it. And primarily what we were trying, like this, the second floor was, or the mezzanine, you know, since we had the tuck under parking along the back, just structurally, there were some things that we were just trying to snap to keep everything simple and structurally clean. So we, in this case, on the second floor, we were sort of programmatically designing within that, within the volume that was resulting from that excursion.
Yeah, I think the reason that I've gravitated to it is that when you look at the footprint of the bathrooms relative to the footprint of the double height space, it appears that the restrooms are very close in size to the actual theater. And there's just something proportionally that doesn't look quite right with that amount of square footage allocated there. And that's why I gravitated to questions about that. I would think that the thing to look at might be to take your rehearsal space and put it into the larger area and consolidate your bathrooms in a smaller space, but that can be worked out in DD.
Yeah, definitely, or SD.
Or SD.
That's a good point.
Thank you for the comments. I mean, all of them have been really, really great to hear.
Okay, well, thank you to BAR Architects and Zach and Alexandria, really wonderful presentation. So if it's okay with the group, maybe we take a quick break just to stretch and take care of a little business. So I would say if we could reconvene at about 7 or 8 minutes, say 6:05, if that works for everybody. We will see you back then, and we'll have our final presentation at that point. Thanks, everyone. Okay, welcome back, everybody. If I could have you turn on your video so I know who's back with us. Okay, it looks like we're waiting for Jason. And okay, I see Elaine, who's there. Okay, we'll wait one more minute, I think, and then we'll get started.
Hey, Brian, thank you so much for that heads up with rehearsal space. Really good.
I had a feeling you were about to be all over it.
No, that was no, but you know what? It then opens right up then with those movable walls or whatever she would like into that whole corridor. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, Martin, are you with us? There you are, thank you. And Jason, are you with us?
Yep.
Okay, Noemi, thank you. All right, so I think let's go ahead and move forward with our third and final presentation. We have the firm of Grimshaw Architects. And Andrew Byrne, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the rest of your team. And thanks so much for presenting your vision this evening.
That's our pleasure. Thanks, Rick. Good to see you again. My name's Andrew Byrne. I'm managing partner of Grimshaw's Los Angeles studio. I have my colleagues with me today who will be doing the bulk of the heavy lifting. I get the dubious honor of just the introductions here, and then they'll do all the hard work, which is great. Raymond Chow from our office and Manyan Lam, who are the creative talent behind all of the contribution that we're making today. So Raymond's going to share his screen, bring that up, and with your permission, we'll just roll straight into our presentation.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Raymond. Well, it's a real honor to be here. This has been an absolute joy, actually, to work on concurrently with some of our other considerations. I don't want to do a belabored introduction to our practice and who we are, but I will give you a brief introduction. We're a global practice. Raymond, if you can advance the slides for me. We're a global practice, and Grimshaw has been in business for over 42 years. We've been resident here in Los Angeles for over 5 years now, and made some really fantastic headway into contributing to the improvement of public realm and public infrastructure within Los Angeles, as well as some more significantly scaled city making and education projects. And we're really excited about this as a cultural project opportunity. We are renowned internationally for our design excellence across all sectors. And in the experiential, the arts and cultural and performance-based buildings, we have a long-standing pedigree that we're able to import best-in-class thinking from around the world. And it's near to our heart, if you go to the next slide, Raymond, because we really love the city of West Hollywood, and City of West Hollywood is a pre-existing client for us. We have been working very closely on the Crenshaw Line North rail integration study to really understand how the introduction of a metro transit line can benefit city making and safeguard neighborhood benefits, and really help
continue the evolution of the city of West Hollywood. And to be part of this group and have a look at the Coast Playhouse, it's something that we've been really excited to do. And that's because it's great working on interesting projects, but it's even better working on them for clients and groups of stakeholders that reflect our personal values, and to have an opportunity to create a bedrock within the community that is a really, I guess, progressive attitude towards being welcoming, being inclusive, and really prioritizing equity, I think is a big contribution that we would like to bring and we'd like to reflect in our values. And it's a great opportunity for us. So we're excited to be doing this. I think that our vision for the project is to really both create a highly functional and flexible and adaptive piece of building and space that will meet all of the user group's needs, but also embody the spirit of the city of West Hollywood and really put on display those values and create a very inclusive and welcoming experience. And we're doing this through visual and spatial communication. We're doing this through transparency and openness. So a lot of our thinking and positioning around this design has been how we can be a beacon and how we can introduce levels of communication through transparency and awareness of occupation through our design without compromising function, to really extend the streetscape and invite the city in and contribute to the streetscape itself. So we're excited about how this might become a beloved piece of the neighborhood and serve the community and have a reach beyond its sort of physical footprint to become a beloved destination within the context. I'm going to touch really briefly on our first pass at this, because I think everyone's aware that each of the three teams here have had 2 bites of the cherry, and I thought it was worthwhile rebooting our phase 1 submission, because there was a lot of ambition in our thinking here to create a really flexible and adaptive series of interlock spaces through here that could be occupied in multiple different configurations. And I think that it was very well received, but I think also there was a great education process that we received in being able to directly communicate with the user group and with the art department to understand a little more their priorities and how they'd like to occupy the building. And it caused for us to reflect on our proposition and reconsider things from first principles. If you go to the next slide, Raymond, you'll see that we had stacked our programming across 3 different levels. And I think one of the things that we were somewhat uncomfortable with was the scale of the building across those 3 stories and how hard we were working the site. And I think a kind of key moment for us in the recalibration of our proposition here was to unlock the potential of the 2 parcels in a conjoined way, and to move away from the dedication of one of these parcels to primarily serve as the supporting infrastructure and parking adjacent, but to reconfigure the building so that we're able to define the streetscape, hold the street edge, and reposition those supporting functions into the laneway to the back. So I think that was quite a critical moment and helped us, I guess, embrace all of the positive aspects of our phase 1 competition submission, and then reposition those into a building which is, I think, more humane in terms of its scale and its relationship to context, but still safeguards that character, that vibrancy, that life, and that metaphoric and physical beacon that we've developed as our design proposition. So I think what you'll hear from Raymond and Manyan are the actual the more discrete and deliberate design moves to execute against the promise and the ambition of these design principles. But if I could reiterate again, we're really enamored with this idea of the dilution of threshold here, and basically the way in which the transparency and visibility of the activity and occupation of the building here can educate people and invite people to explore more and become curious and engage with the programming that's going on here and with the community. Raymond, I'll leave you walking through the kind of key features of the scheme now.
And nice to meet you, everyone. So I'll talk about the key organization principles that we applied here. There are 4 key moves that we did.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yeah. Can you hear me a bit better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let me see. Sorry, is it better now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have the wrong setting. Sorry about that. So I'll go into talking about the key organization principles that we applied here at the site. There are 4 main moves that we did. First, we want to create a truly pedestrian-friendly environment along Santa Monica Boulevard by pushing all the vehicular traffic to the back of the site. So all the parking goes to the back. Secondly, we want to maximize the building frontage along Santa Monica Boulevard in the form of a gallery storefront to really activate that sidewalk space. It is used as a pre-functional space for performances, which has direct connection to the cafe to the west. And number 3, capitalizing on WeHo's street life as part of the Playhouse experience and crafting a parklet at the eastern end, which serve 3 functions. It first introduces an outdoor gathering space for the public as they enter the building and enjoy during intermission times. Secondly, to retain the side entrance into the adjacent business or any future development there. And thirdly, to serve as a connection to the parking at the back. And lastly, our 4th move is to maintain sort of a secure and high performance black box theater that is strategically located at the northwestern corner of the site, where it is most quiet and insulated from any street traffic or solar exposure. So with that being said, I want to walk you through our spatial layout of the programs. Here is our first floor plan. So
Could you zoom in, please? Wait, excuse me. Would you please zoom in for those of us that are hard of vision?
Yeah, I can try my best to do that. So it doesn't jump around as much. So this is the main entry into the Playhouse, and is located at the southwestern corner of the site in the form of an entry parklet, which works seamlessly with the lobby space to the west to create a unique and welcoming entry sequence. The lobby is anchored by a ticketing kiosk that is supported by secure administrative and kitchenette functions at the back. And it also has an elevator and stairs that take visitors to the restroom amenities and viewing mezzanines on the floor above. And zooming back out. And then the lobby actually flows seamlessly into this fully glazed pre-function gallery space to the west that feeds into the black box theater up here. And it also connects the cafe to the west. The glazed gallery with its large format display wall augments the entry procession into the theater and creates a truly animated street frontage along the sidewalk, because you have this fully transparent facade here. And third, the black box theater is a highly functional performance space nestled inside the building for maximum lighting and sound control. It is a 2-story high space that is approximately 50 by 35 foot in plan, which can support various modes of performances and events. And Mannion later will provide more details on how we have maximized flexibility in this space. And the last piece to this ground floor is the large format acoustic operable wall that could open up to allow events to infiltrate the exterior parking area when needed and allow natural ventilation when this is not taking place. The theater is also served by a dressing room and storage spaces in this northwestern area, which has direct access to both the backstage and the loading area along the back valley. And going on to the second floor, the elevator and the stairs from the main lobby provides easy access to the restroom located at this corner of the second floor. These restrooms are designed to be gender neutral, which promotes universal access and inclusivity, which are important part of the project. The second floor also contains the rehearsal mezzanine and control room that overlooks the theater below. The connection between the mezzanine and the theater creates an interesting potential for viewing or even performances to take place across the two levels. And the rehearsal mezzanine is also connected to the outdoor terrace to the north, which can be used as an area for respite for staff members or as secondary rehearsal area with visual connection to the Hollywood Hills. The second floor also provides access to the elevated catwalk system, which can be used to access lighting and rigging for the theater. And this is the Skeeman section cutting east to west. You can see the double height black box theater here and how it sits in relation to other programs such as the lobby and restroom spaces above, and also the parklet outside. In terms of building identity, what we want to create is a building that is uniquely West Hollywood with an architectural identity that celebrates performing arts. So first, we've taken the marquee, which was a legacy in the original Playhouse, reinvented it as a continuous fascia band that also serves as a bold signature for the building. And secondly, we have maximized transparency here along the street level through the gallery storefront so that the building can truly speak to the public through showcasing the activities within. And then working in tandem, the entry parklet over here is an extension of the public sidewalk that can openly welcome the citizens of WeHo into the building, which is made for the community. And the final piece in this exterior identity is the expressive translucent veil that encloses the upper level. It is designed to be a playful identifying feature of the building, and at the same time, a functional skin that provides privacy and daylight control for the rehearsal and supporting spaces within. And at night, the building is designed to glow. And it becomes a beacon that symbolizes the important role that performing art has on the community. And in essence, I think what we've created is a building that is intuitive, high performing, yet elegant, with a unique character that elevates the performing arts experience and encapsulate the open, inclusive, and humanistic spirit of West Hollywood. So jumping into part two, talking about urban activation, the project is designed to speak to its context and activate the urban realm. The interplay between proportion, modulation, and materiality in the elevation creates an expressive exterior that relates to the many other bold and diverse architectural works in the city. The existing parking access along Santa Monica Boulevard is eliminated, and a parklet is crafted in this place to welcome the public into the block. And the main entry of the building is actually strategically located to the side to ease congestion on the sidewalk during busy performances. And the street facade along here is fully glazed to allow the life of the building to be fully revealed to the public. The art wall of the pre-function gallery is designed to be experienced from both inside and outside the building. The gallery also provides direct connection to the Western Cafe or the adjacent future development when it takes place. And the last piece is the fascia marquee, which is a prominent feature sized for both pedestrian and vehicle sightlines. This height relates to the datum of adjacent awnings and bring the building down to a more comparable human scale along the street. And in terms of site planning, the vehicular arrival happens at either the visitor pickup and drop-off zone located along the Santa Monica Boulevard, or at the back here at the staff parking at the rear of the site, which can be accessed from Switzer Avenue. From these two locations, the user enters the building through the main entrance here, which is located on the west side of the parklet. And the parklet is secured by gates on the south and north ends, which will be open during business hour and will be closed to secure the entire block after hours. The two existing palm trees have been preserved, which I know are quite iconic on the existing site. And it is planted at great planters at both ends of the parklet, along with other native species. Other landscape amenities are also on the site, and they include the outdoor terrace and also the planted fascia that's on the second level of the building, while the rooftop is constructed as a green roof, something that can become an amenity for the future adjacent development. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Mannion, who will talk about sustainable strategies.
Great, thanks Raymond. And hi everyone, can everyone hear me well? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, great, thank you. So in terms of sustainable strategies, we see this building design as a holistic ecological environment, driven by this metaphor on the right-hand side of the page as this gradient of biomes from mesic to chaparral to grassland. And this provided a really focused way for us to think about the concerns at the ground level pertaining to water, soil, inhabitants, all the way up to the roof level, which is the driest level, and its interactions with the sun and heat. So if we start at the bottom, we have the entry plaza parklet, and we have all the native vegetation and a set of permeable pavers as its ground. We think of those working all together for stormwater capture, preventing useless runoff when it rains, and then of course native vegetation supporting the biodiversity of the environment. The parklet itself is also a signal to the city that, we're prioritizing outdoor, unconditioned space, making use of Southern California's weather, and that also we're trying to prioritize more sustainable modes of transport, such as arriving on foot or arriving by bike. Right above that, we have the deep fascia along the southern boundary of the site, which will also provide some amount of solar shading for the glazed wall on the inside. And then parking at the rear of the lot. That's on the northern side of the site, and we're utilizing the building mass footprint itself to essentially shade the cars. So even when you pull away, you don't have to pump the AC all the way to the top. And once again, although we're providing solar, we'd like to provide electric vehicle ready stations. We're prioritizing street frontage for those sustainable modes of transport. As we move up in terms of the building section to the chaparral zone, we're retaining the key ecological features such as the palm trees that Raymond already mentioned. And that is retaining the, not only retaining the biodiversity that exists, but also, waste is wasteful, and we want to keep as much as we can on the site. We have a planted outdoor gathering space, which Raymond had also pointed to in the back on the northern end, that is also further unconditioned space that we should totally maximize and make use of. In terms of the interior of the building, we're using mass timber floor panels, CLT or DLT, which is an amazing carbon sequestering material that performs structurally brilliantly, but at the same time also provides a certain warmth to the environment, and also recognizing part of a sustainable strategy is a building that promotes the wellness of its inhabitants on the inside, and we think CLT plays a great part of that. And then the diffuse polycarbonate panels with the ribbing, those are both providing the functions of privacy at times for the top floor, but also allowing in daylight in strategic moments of the day when that's needed. So then we move up to the top level, the terrace grassland level. We have northern oriented skylights that can be operable, and those will function for passive ventilation. Since they're on the second floor, and actually because we're taking advantage of the double height space, we'll have stack effect happening, so pulling the cool air up and the hot air can escape. In terms of the roof being planted with native grasses, we think this is a great way to basically, one, capture stormwater. The necessary buildup for that roof is already going to provide a lot of insulation for the space below it. And then once again, also supporting a really robust ecosystem there. We also have the ability to, of course, we haven't put very much other function on the roof in case that there is the desire for on-site energy capture using photovoltaics. But we also were mindful of the fact that, this building is part of a larger, I think, street development where there might be a lot of future development. And so, what do they want to see when they look down? Do they want to see a green roof, or do they want to see PVs? I think it's just a conversation that we can have further down the road. Next, please. In terms of flexibility of programming, I don't want to beleaguer these points too much. I think Raymond covered a lot, but starting with the first rehearsal mezzanine, not only is this rehearsal space, it's also a viewing gallery. We've been mindful of the needs for acoustic separation and privacy. And so even the soundproof curtains and walls between space 1 and the Playhouse below, those are operable and can be adjusted depending on the needs. The pre-function gallery, not only is it a gallery exhibition space that can be more community oriented, but a specific playwright or director who comes in with a certain vision of procession can also utilize that so that the performance can actually start earlier, right, before you walk into the Playhouse. We have retractable seating and the raised floor on the inside of the Playhouse as well, which sort of further facilitates that kind of flexibility and artistic creativity, out of the box thinking of the performances that might occur in this space. And, for that, we also have the 30-foot clear height inside, which I think is a lot to work with in terms of what the possible stage productions can occur inside. Number 5 and number 7, we have number 5, 9, and 7, apologies for the strange numbering, but, we have both a glazed catwalk wing behind, which can be both additional viewing areas, as well as maybe being part of the production. The glazing provides that kind of flexibility. We have a catwalk that wraps around the interior along the 2 walls. So, different lighting rigs and different production setups can be created through there. And then we also have strategic openings in the walls that Raymond showed earlier, which create different levels of connectivity in terms of the space. So even number 8, which is the dressing room and storage, that can have a different adjacency and relationship to the Playhouse, depending on which walls we've decided to open or close. And then number 6, the outdoor terrace, additional space for running lines. It could be part of a social function, outdoor lounge area. It's still fully connected to that rehearsal space if you want it to be through that connective glazed catwalk that you see between the 2 spaces. In terms of materials and constructability, we understand that selection of materials is a balance between their utility as a building system, their cost, and also their carbon impact. And so with the case of the primary structure of the building, we're utilizing steel. Steel because it can span really big distances and we can achieve those big open sight lines that we need for performance, while also being able to apply great color palettes to it. And also understanding that with steel, there are a lot of more carbon neutral options now, such as electric arc furnace fabricated steel, which we would like to implement as a sort of the key primary structure of the building. It's easy to work with, it's robust, and it also allows for the implementation of those CLT floor panels that we've mentioned earlier, right? So it's able to house some very hardworking carbon sequestering materials in this sort of hybrid primary secondary structure with the mass timber. The mass timber that we've selected, the span isn't as great, but it doesn't need to be because we're utilizing that in the spaces that are slightly smaller, more intimate, such as the gathering spaces, the open lobby spaces, things like that. And then even with our polycarbonate panels that are, creating that nice fluting material on the outside, those have been selected because of their economy. And then even in terms of the thickness, we've been very careful to specify a specific thickness that can work with that radial bending. And so nothing that we're really proposing here in this design is, I would say, like crazy or out of the box. It's actually very common specifications that we feel we're very creatively implementing together to create an overall unique system. When it comes to the interior finish materials, we know that this is a very tricky zone where you want something to be high performing, but at the same time, we have concerns about VOCs. We have concerns about, you know, the wastefulness of certain materials. And so it's our goal in working with our industry professionals and in-house to provide materials on the inside, on the finishes that are renewable, recyclable, while also achieving the demands of a highly, you know, high performing acoustic space, of course, thermal proofing, waterproofing, all of those elements. In terms of designing to budget, we were given this spreadsheet and told to give our architectural opinion on it, but we decided to go above and beyond and utilize our contacts at Cumming Group, you know, great project manager, cost estimators, renowned in the industry. And so our contact there works together with us based off quantity takeoffs from our model to provide us with basically the quantums at the price quantums at the time when this was filled out. You know, he asked a lot more questions than we would have asked, and it was a really great working relationship. And in the end, we were able to hit the target. You can see down in the bottom there, it's $4.4 million, taking into account the contingencies and allowances that your team provided us. The caveat to this, of course, is that we did this 4 or 5 months ago. And so, you know, prices continue to fluctuate. That's the conversation of the day. But we understand this to be, you know, an ongoing process, and we'll continue to you know, work to hit this target. That's what this spreadsheet exists as, right? As a tool for us to continue to refine the design, working within the constraints that, you know, West Hollywood, you've set for us. So just the last point is, you know, we were really encouraged and, you know, almost in admiration of your very transparent commitment towards equity and sustainability. Documents like the Climate Action Plan, the mission statement, you know, we see this understanding that the concepts of equity and sustainability are interwoven and reliant on each other for their mutual realization. And so, you know, a sustainable, healthy environment is one in which a community's social well-being is prioritized. And this too is a core tenet of our own sustainability objectives here at Grimshaw. And it goes without saying that a thriving arts scene is crucial to that well-being. We believe that the elements of the arts, such as storytelling, dynamic placemaking, and just sheer excellence, are integral components of a successful architecture project, just as much as it is of a thriving art scene. And so we think, you know, this Coast Playhouse is the perfect place to have that happen. We hope that you can see through our design and, you know, the things we've shared today that we are on the same page and share a lot of these same goals. So thank you so much for providing us with that opportunity.
Hey, thank you, Mannion and team. So same process for our advisory group members. We'll have about 20 minutes plus or minus to ask questions of the Grimshaw team. So would anybody like to start?
I've raised my hand.
Go ahead, Lindsay. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, thank you all so much for your work. And Mannion, I really appreciate your attention at the end to our cultural equity statement. Thank you for recognizing it and the cultural diversity of our community and how important it is that this space really reflected. Yeah, it's, you know, the Mariachis Aquarius right in the middle, followed by James Wynn planting more trees and Tobias on their fall right. You know, we are very rich as a community, you know, with just fabulous humans. So thank you for that. Could you please bring up your, you know, your drawings again? I've got a question about loading in through the dressing room. Is that what I was seeing?
Yeah, this is the first floor plan.
Yeah. So I see an arrow going right through the dressing room and the word loading next to it. Is that what you're doing?
So I think with this configuration, there's several ways in which the loading can happen. I think in general, the loading is situated at the back of the site. And depending on what you're loading in, I think it could be through the dressing room or sort of through this parking area to the east, where you have a little bit larger format operable doors to load larger objects if needed.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure that I was seeing. And looking at the drawing, how big is that rehearsal space? Up on the second floor, the sideway view, or whatever view you want to look. How big is your rehearsal space?
Yeah, I believe it's around.
Please zoom in. It's really challenging to see. Yeah.
Yeah. It should be around 20 by 30.
Okay, right there. Okay, so, and then you've got a corridor to your garden.
Up here.
To your left, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so, one of my questions and thoughts right away is another space. I know it's going to increase your budget, but in terms of what we need, what I would be using this space would be another rehearsal space, because we need often more than one space. We break out into at least 2, if not 3 spaces at a time. And the function of an outdoor garden during the daytime doesn't meet, at least my particular need. I really enjoy the gallery space in the front along the walk, and how you utilize the entire front of Santa Monica Boulevard. It's really, really wonderful. And did I see in the drawings that you had another space, another performance space? So there were 2 theaters?
I believe that was the previous scheme. There was a scheme that we contemplated. Is this the one you're referring
all
to?
right. Okay. All right. Just okay. Yeah. Okay. So no is the short answer to that. Okay.
No, not in this current scheme.
Okay.
That's
yeah. So my real thing was, could we do spaces 5 and 9 together, going back to that previous drawing?
Oh, the section.
Yeah. Pardon me, fellow board members, for being so picky here. I'm just really wondering about that. Yeah. 5 and 9. Yeah. So if that space 5 is the gallery wing, could we not add, I'll go the opposite way, 6, so that we have that space sort of continuous, or would that be 2 spaces for rehearsal?
We could, if I may, Lindsay, we
sorry.
had, no, that's fine. I was just going to say that we had contemplated the function of this terrace exactly as you're describing. We thought it was an interesting offer to provide a different context for gathering, rehearsal, running lines, and a different space to go to within the building that was sort of readily accessible. And we had kind of prioritized the idea of this being a different experience, a different type of space, so therefore it being outdoors, and maybe it's fairly verdant and fairly heavily planted. I'm hearing from you that perhaps it would be more valuable or greater flexibility if it was part of the building volume. I think that we've been, as you could hopefully see from the presentation from both Raymond and Manyan, we've been incredibly disciplined about being accurate in terms of our square footage, our takes, and our design to budget requirements to deal with that very real issue of deliverability, which I think is critical. I mean, you have 3 wonderful teams, 3 wonderful designs here. For me, the only tragedy in all of this is if you don't get to build the City Playhouse. So we took that responsibility very seriously. And the reason that we didn't enclose that volume is because we were on our limit of square footage. I think if we can make it work within the budget, we can satisfy ourselves that it could be delivered. There's no reason why we couldn't extend the envelope and enclose that space, and then think about utilizing the parklet and the soft landscaping in the parking at the rear for the outdoor breakout spaces.
Well, thank you very much. Finally, the 30-foot height. What a wonderful gift, just hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. So thank you all for sharing. I'm very, very grateful.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you, Lindsay. Esther, you're up next, followed by Brian.
Thanks very much, and thank you for the presentation. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about landscape and open space. I'd like to start with the parklet. If you could go to the first floor plan or the site plan. What are the dimensions of the parklet
I think it should be slightly more than 20 foot across by 30 to 35 feet, maybe.
So 20 feet wide. Okay. And then,
yeah.
and then you, what do you, thinking about this kind of, it's not exactly a super wide space once you start putting a few people in there and maybe some furnishings if people are going to be sitting out there. I think one of the other things that we are thinking about is kind of how the block develops. And did you think about what might be happening to the east, on the east side of that parklet, and what the scale of that, what do you see as the scale of that building and how the nature of that space might change?
Maybe I can speak to this. I think that within the immediacy of the design prompt, we wanted to make sure that we were, say, respecting the existing certain design principles that are set up with the adjacent development. So immediately thinking, okay, we need to maintain a certain level of porosity along the edge of the parklet instead of saying having a lot of dense planting around there, right? Because we want to think about future connectivity. In terms of the functions of the parklet itself, I think understanding it's a place for gathering. And so even in terms of the selections and placements of the planting versus hard pavers that people can actually be, say, moving across, that was a key principle for us. And we think that there's a lot of ways to, say, soften an environment without necessarily putting in loads and loads of planting.
Mannion, I'm actually not asking you about the plant material. I'm asking about the proportions of the space between the theater and what's now Crossroads, but in the future, that is likely not to be a one-story building. And how do you feel about do you feel the proportions of your 20-foot wide space will hold up in the future when that site is redeveloped? What is your vision? What do you think is likely to be the height of that building of a new building on the east? And how will that impact the proportions of that space?
I see. Well, I can't speak to the future, but looking around at the different buildings around, we see 5-story buildings, maybe 5/2. I think that having the palm trees in there, that helps to immediately draw the eye up without feeling as if the space itself is, I would say, too narrow. I think that in terms of from a city zoning perspective, having a 20-foot space is already quite generous beyond what's required between commercial buildings in and of themselves. And so I think even if you were to have a building that's, say, 40, 50 feet there, I think that it's also our hope that through city planning and considerations that whatever design of that building is cognizant of that parklet. I think, it's our aspiration that this Coast Playhouse itself is a benchmark to which other buildings are designed, parklet included.
Okay, all right, and then I want to ask you about the green roof, because we've not seen a proposal that extensive in the other presentations. And I wanted to know if you've been very deliberate about thinking about carbon embodied in materials, about sequestration, about carbon use in terms of energy use of materials. Let's talk about water a little bit. And you mentioned stormwater retention, but I'm wondering, where do you see the water? How do you support a green roof this big, philosophically, not functionally, but philosophically, this much green space on the site that requires water? Where is that water coming from? What's your approach to that?
So I think part of that comes down to species selection in the first place. California native plants, they're accustomed to very, very dry summers. The water happens in the wintertime. Moreover, we have periods where there's high levels of condensation throughout the day, or throughout the night rather, due to the marine layer, through June gloom, through May gray. And so there's a lot of, I would say, natural irrigation that occurs in that way. I think that if we were to also look at the budget again and think about the different systems we can integrate, we can start thinking about gray water recycling as well as an alternative to providing the necessary irrigation for something that is located on the roof.
Okay, and then finally, speaking of budget, could you show us in the budget where that green roof is priced? Might have missed that in the quick review of the budget.
It's a lazy $135,000 worth of investment there. So it's in,
Oh, I see it in the roofing systems. Okay.
in the
Yeah.
roofing system.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much.
Great insulation though, Esther, for that value, for that price.
Yeah, well, just keep in mind those natives have many of them have a very deep soil section. So, just don't forget that.
There is that balance of weight. But I think, your line of inquiry, I think, was quite telling in the sense that we were very conscious that there is a fifth elevation and there will be development that is looking down on this building. And I think we've been aware of that and responsive to that condition.
All right, Brian, followed by Elaine.
So very thorough and very well thought out presentation and building. You answered so many of the questions just through the quality of the presentation you did. So I feel like you need to be commended for that. I also think that you've also provided a very functional theater space. It really meets a lot of the requirements that I think a proper theater would need. So congrats on that. My question is actually about the rehearsal space as well, and about the light control of that space. Because of the orientation of the building, because of the translucent material, I'd like you to speak to how you feel like you can control light and the usability of that space during the day, and how that control system, if you have one, would impact the design of the building and how that building reads at different times of the day and night.
You're on a roll, Manyan. Keep going.
Okay. All right. So to answer your question about daylight and control, so you're right, the material itself is static as it is, but I think, we've allotted quite a lot, I would say, in our budget in terms of interior finishes for things like curtains, shades. I think that we would probably be working with some system that is similar to the curtains that we have separating space 1 from the Playhouse itself. We could definitely implement that onto the interior of this building. Something that was important to us when we were developing this exterior facade was that it didn't feel like this sort of superfluous secondary or tertiary exoskeleton applied to the building. That glazing is the external line, is the envelope itself. And so I think that there is definitely room for the implementation of some kind of interior window covering. I think that we've already started to set up this rhythm through the pleating, the fluting of the building. And I think that through careful selection and calibration of whatever system we hang, it could only sort of add additional texture and depth to that space. I think it's a conversation we'd love to have further with you in terms of what kind of rehearsal you need. Is it replicating the exact same conditions, or is it more just sort of reading lines? I think that, especially to Lindsay's point about having additional rehearsal space, once we get a sense of what specifics you need and the differences between maybe 2 spaces would be, we can further drive that forward.
Okay, thank you.
And what about the part?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Brian, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no problem at all. And then my follow-up to that is the corner condition where this polycarbonate screen meets the party wall. And I know this is just conceptual, but how are you thinking you're going to handle that condition? And what would that facade be like?
It's a good question. I think as we have drawn there is a very solid fire rated wall along that. And so that is it's a new party wall that we provided within our property footprint. From there, we could use any sort of, metal extruded channel condition in order to have that tie in a clean way and provide the thermal breaks we need.
Brian, to answer your question directly, the conditions today, we would love to finish that elevation so the building doesn't look like it's got a front and a back. So we'd like to wrap that finish over the top of the corner development. In the future, it's pretty likely that we'll need to remove that skin and have a party wall condition with a development that's higher than the Playhouse. And I think that this design identity would be able to accommodate both of those conditions pretty seamlessly.
Okay.
And good answer. My last question is probably way ahead of the reading, but will this polycarbonate work in that proximity to a property line on that party wall side?
Well, I think the wall would need to be rated, and we'd need to look at that edge condition. And it's a good question around whether we need any specific treatment adjacent to that that fire line, whether it be additional sprinkler treatment or additional rating that sits at that location. So I think we'd need to work through that. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to sort that out with the Department of Building and Safety. So looking forward to that conversation if it eventuates.
I think we have one last question. I'm
you.
sorry, I'm going to interrupt because Elaine, I think we have one last question, and then I want to make sure we have time for some public thoughts, and I'm concerned that our Zoom is going to cut off at 7. So Elaine.
I have just a couple of very quick questions. The second floor restrooms, how many stalls are you showing there?
I believe there are 3.
So three public stalls for essentially a 99-seat theater?
Correct. So 1 ADA and 2 regular stalls.
Okay, that seems insufficient for that type, as many people gathering. Second question is the fencing between the parklet able to close off so that space can be secured both at night and also for private events if it was used for that?
Yeah, so the black dash line that you see here, these can be completely closed off.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then I don't know anything about polycarbonate panels, but the yellow time, do they color from sunlight exposure? Is that something that is of concern?
It's a traditional criticism of polycarbonate over the course of the last 25 to 30 years, but modern products now have the UV stabilization, and you'll see them deployed. I think what we're comfortable with is that we've utilized this material, admittedly not in Southern California, but we've utilized this material in our projects previously, and there's a deep precedent of built projects that have aged over time that we can use as a point of reference. So we've got confidence that this is actually a viable and really appealing and appropriate material for a cultural building. It does create that really, I think, beautiful ephemerality of that ghosted read at certain times and the changing condition across the spectrum of the day when the light varies, that I think is I think very evocative and communicative about the occupation and the activity that's happening within.
Thank you. And then last question, if you can go to the I think it's slide 24. Yeah. You show one configuration in the Playhouse just with bleacher seats, but how flexible is that space? Can it be set up for theater in the round and other configurations for performances?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Raymond, if we look at the plan view, I think, as you mentioned, we wanted to make sure we were approaching as close to a square as possible, while also, preserving necessary sight lines. And so, depending on the bleachers, essentially, I think that we can have it set up as a theater in the round. Having multiple access points to enter, I think, also lends to that greater flexibility.
Okay, and the bleachers are removable? Could you take those out and just have stairs?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Those are my questions. Thanks so much.
Yeah, sorry, one more thing is you can see that we provided this sort of deeper wall. Those bleachers, the systems these days are kind of magical. Those could stack fully within the depth of that wall so that you have that full footprint available to you afterwards.
Great.
I think that's an important point, Manyan, because it's a bit of a fallacy to say that it will be convenient to pack these up, ship them out, put them in another room and store them away. The fact that these are like drawers that you can pull out or push away really promotes the utilization of the flexibility of the space.
Okay, well, thank you so much to the Grimshaw Architects team. Another really wonderful presentation, 3 great visions this evening. So I want to make sure we have a little time for members of the public to share some thoughts, but I am concerned we're going to get cut off for Zoom, so we're going to keep going as much as we can. If we do get cut off somehow, we'll be in touch with our advisory group members for next week's meeting. But the idea is to work on your sort of individual thoughts based on what you've heard and come prepared next week to discuss them. And we'll go through sort of segment by segment, looking at things like urban activation and site planning and performance space flexibility and some of the themes that have been brought up this evening. So let me see if there's any members of our community who's been watching this evening who might want to share a thought or two with the advisory group. Let's see. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, very good. And if there are members of the community who have some thoughts, you're welcome to email staff and let us know what you're thinking. So thinking then about next week, we're going to be reconvening at 4 p.m. on Tuesday of next week. Elaine, I know you're not going to be able to join us, but everybody else, we're hoping you can. I think procedurally, we'll be looking at sort of a group discussion format, trying to identify some of the strengths and weaknesses that we've talked about and some of the visions that make sort of the most sense going forward. If you have any questions about the form we've sent you, is there anybody that has any comments or concerns on that? That's more of a guide just to help you think through how you might evaluate each of these ideas. Okay, now Andrew.
Yeah, do we have access to the presentations today?
Yes, we will get them so we can have them as a reference for next week. Certainly, I think it'll help to discuss and deliberate. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank our teams that presented this evening. Really 3 great visions, and to our advisory group members, we're really excited to hear your thoughts next week in particular. Thanks for great questions. I know I learned a lot this evening just listening to some of the questions, and I'm confident that regardless of how this plays out, the city's going to get a very, very nice facility going forward that really taps into the values of the city. I think all 3 teams really did a great job of understanding West Hollywood as a city. So thanks everybody for the time you put in, and we look forward to reconvening next week. Andrew, did you have one other thought, or is your hand just still up? Okay, Brian? Any?
Great job to all the teams. I was clapping.
Okay. All right, anybody want to have a concluding remark before we move on? Anybody else is comfortable? All right, thanks for your time. We'll see you next week, 4 p.m. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.